Sorry if this isn't like the most legible, but today we'll be talking some Ja Morant's trade. Before we start, obviously, I don't want to sit here and say I have some inside information that I know he's going to get traded. No, I don't know. But we do know that they're building this team around Jaren Jackson Jr., and it seems like Tomas Isalo is maybe not interested in dealing with the antics that have played the Ja Morant era. So this is a team that needs to rectify their shooting deficiencies. They're trying to establish the defensive identity around Jaren Jackson Jr. and all these wings that they have, as well as they probably want to maximize the control of their cap sheet. And looking at Ja Morant, who has an approximate outgoing salary of $39 million, to make any deal back, they're going to have to take back at least roughly $31.2 million with a ceiling of $49 million. And I've thought, like, look, I mean, if there was a team that would be dumb enough or desperate enough to make a move, people will joke that it's the Pelicans with a deal built around probably DeJounte Murray, but I doubt that would ever happen. It makes no sense. If there was going to be an injured trade, I think it would be around Fred VanVleet being the injured player, because he actually fits the long-term identity that this team wants to build. And outside of that, yeah, like, I think people are going to obviously put Brooklyn in there, maybe a Minnesota. Again, if you're dealing with a deal with Minnesota over here would have to, it's just weird to make that deal happen, even as much as people would love to see a Ja Morant, Anthony Edwards duo. So we're going to go through here and talk roughly some team trades that could potentially happen. As I mentioned earlier, if the Pelicans really wanted to double down and become desperate and try to save their season, you'd assume that it would be a DeJounte Murray deal, maybe built around a DeJounte Murray, Jordan Hawkins package, which from my understanding would be able to be done under the current guise of the second apron and first apron, the apron rules, as that would work. Not saying that it should happen, but if we're just trying to have an idea of what the Grizzlies and Pelicans would probably want in compensation, DeJounte Murray may or may not come back this year, and then you get a young shooter who can play multiple positions in Jordan Hawkins. Now, people are going to queue up the Brooklyn Nets wanting some star power. That is quite possible when you bring in someone like a Ja Morant. Now, who would be built into this trade? There was for the longest time that Nick Claxton was going to go to the Pelicans, and I kind of like the idea of a Nick Claxton going to the Grizzlies instead. And it doesn't have to just be a Claxton Ja Morant swap, which I do believe could potentially be because of the salary situation for the Brooklyn Nets. You could do something like that. I think there would want to be some compensation, or like maybe a John Conchar thrown in there to get like a Tyrese Martin or a Jalen Wilson back. But here the Grizzlies end up with Nick Claxton and Jaren Jackson Jr. front court to then hopefully with Ty Jerome coming back be able to run the point guard position. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, in this scenario, wouldn't you want to maybe bring back a point guard who could? But there really isn't a point guard here. I was thinking maybe you have them throw in a Haywood Highsmith and you throw in a John Conchar, and I would assume that the Grizzlies would rather have John Conchar. But right here where they're saying this deal would not be able to happen until later in the season, and recently traded Haywood Highsmith cannot be aggregated until October 15th, which has already happened. So this is actually incorrect. So it can happen. But I do think that is if they were to do a deal like this. But again, if the Grizzlies were trading Ja Morant and they weren't going to get a guard back, you're assuming that Ty Jerome and Scottie Pippen would be the two guys rolling forward with this team. Now, a few of the other teams that I think we mentioned, again, the Timberwolves and the Rockets. I think the Rockets, he doesn't really fit their style, but if they were trying to just cash in that Fred VanVleet was out for a while, maybe the Rockets, I mean, obviously the Grizzlies would have to maybe be compensated accordingly, because my assumption is that if you would be trading Ja Morant for Fred VanVleet, who's out for the entire season, the Rockets would be compensating the Grizzlies in a way that we'd expect them to want. And what I mean by that is, if I don't know why I put the Celtics there, but if the Rockets are trading an injured player for Ja Morant, and even if Ja Morant has a net negative value, you would think that Fred VanVleet, which right here he's making $25 million. I want to see if they'd be able to just switch up the salaries now right here, because it's over by $14 million. I know people are going to say that that salary needs to, you also have to wait for a certain amount of time because of Fred VanVleet having signed a contract in the offseason. Obviously, we'd assume this is further down the road. So if they were trying to shed that $14 million in salary, I wonder who it would be. Would it be Atari Eason? And I think this is where it becomes difficult if you're looking at that deal, because I don't know who you would trade then to fill that salary, because I wouldn't stack a bunch of salary. So I think we're going to have to rule out the Rockets right here, ladies and gentlemen. This is too difficult of a deal for them to do, at least in the season, as I just don't think it would be beneficial for them. So I remember the Athletic Daily Show this morning put in an Emmanuel Quickly Ja Morant deal. I just don't think the front office of the Grizzlies would want to get that money, even though I think Quickly would be a better fit to Isalo's offense. I don't think having another cook in the kitchen in Toronto, especially with like floor spacing, it's not going to make things work. But Quickly having 4 years left on that deal, I don't know if that's going to be something that you want, just because of the money that you'd have committed there for the amount of time. So you move forward. I just don't see the Heat being interested in a move like that. He just doesn't fit their style of play. I mean, if he's gifted to them, maybe, but I just don't see anyone that they would be able to swap that they feel like would help raise their ceiling. Now, this is one that I wouldn't be shocked. So if you do a DeMar DeRozan, I mean, it doesn't even have to be DeMar. It could honestly be built around Malik Monk, which I know it's crazy, but Dario Saric, Devin Carter, and then you send Ja Morant over there. I think they do need to cut a little bit, and that could be a Dennis Schroeder in this deal, and that way they don't lose right here. So if maybe and the thing is there's still money that could be cut. So this is allowable by 14. So if you feel like they wanted to throw in another front, which in this scenario, I wonder, are you telling me I could take out Dennis Schroeder from this deal, and this deal you're over the allowable by 10. So it'd have to include Schroeder. That's what I'm saying. But would it have to include Saric? But I feel like they would want to get rid of Saric. And in this, we already threw John Conchar in there. So I'm wondering if there is somebody else you can maybe toss in as a sweetener, which maybe it is a G Jackson, and this deal could still go through, but I feel like you'd want a front court player back. But this is actually one that I like, because the Kings now churn Schroeder and Malik Monk. Now, don't get me wrong. Ja Morant, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine, Domantas Sabonis might be one of the worst defensive teams of all time. But, I mean, you continue to double down on having a bunch of ball handling. Just seems like the thing that the Kings would do. Maybe the prior... I mean, Vivek Ranadivev really seems to be pushing the envelope on moves that he wants done. I think an interesting one that could be done is by the Suns. I think the Dallas Mavericks, Suns, and Blazers would be the only other teams that would maybe be interested in doing these deals. And with the Suns, I wonder, I don't think Dylan Brooks would be traded back. Maybe they do trade back for Dylan Brooks, but I think the idea of a Grayson Allen, or really, because I was going to say a Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen package, and you ask them to maybe throw in a Nick Richards in there, and you send them a Ja Morant. I don't think that's too crazy of a deal. If you're the Suns, you get yourself Ja Morant to join Jalen Green and Devin Booker, and then you have Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, Nick Richards, gives you a center to help out the front court, a bunch of two-way forwards, wings, and Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, who fits like what Isalo and Zach Kleiman want to do with the Grizzlies. Blazers, I think you would be trying to get yourself Drew Holiday basically, and be selling that the fact that you're like, oh, Drew and Ja kind of swap it. Like, we want that. And like, you guys get a star player who like could maybe work out. Maybe we just swap stuff and their contracts are the same length and Drew's cheaper and he fits what we want to do. So that's my thoughts right there. Now, looking through, I mentioned earlier the Timberwolves. I just think this becomes very difficult to get this deal done because it would have to involve a Julius Randle. It's like literally the only way to get this deal done is Julius Randle, unless you're doing like Jaden McDaniels, which I doubt would happen. But yeah, like Julius Randle would have to be the deal. And if it's not Julius Randle, how would the deal have to be done? It becomes difficult, but it's something along these lines where right here, you're still already about 10 million short. So to get this deal done, but we already threw in DiVincenzo, Conley, Dillingham. Yeah. Like, you would have to basically, if you were going to keep the core together, you'd have to give up so freaking much of that youth and package. So it'd have to be either Naz Reid or Terrence Shannon thrown in there. I mean, not Terrence Shannon, Naz Reid or Julius Randle, because to do everybody else, it makes absolutely no sense. And even here, I put up, it's still $722,000 short from being able to be done if you were to include all those players. So the Timberwolves have to find someone to take Julius Randle or Naz Reid, or just use that as their trade chip, which I just don't think would happen. And looking through the rest of the league, I just don't see anybody else being that desperate to make a move. Maybe the Bulls do, but like Ja Morant and Josh Giddey wouldn't work. So that's my problem there. The Bucks don't have anything crazy that they could offer. They already used that to get themselves Miles Turner, nor do I think Giannis and Ja would work together. So you look around the rest of the league. I was thinking, would the Mavericks be crazy? They're like, we need to go in until Kyrie comes back. They're like, Klay sucks at this point. And we're looking to drop Caleb's contract. We're already at 26 million, ladies and gentlemen. You assume D'Angelo Russell's thrown in there, and this would be, you know, I'm going to turn off the recently signed thing. So this way we can use them. So we're already at, what, 39, 31. Would this even be able to happen? So we would have to cut $7 million in salary. So this is possible, ladies and gentlemen. Throw in Dwight Powell and that shit. And Jaden, look, I wouldn't even be surprised. Like, this is like not even that like preposterous of a deal. And if you're looking at like who could fill in the back end of this deal for a team like the, but this is what it could end up looking like. You could maybe redirect some contracts, or like add a John Conchar, which I don't think would be that preposterous. I mean, we've used them in almost every deal. I think that might not be possible. It's still possible. Still possible. And you throw in Gigi, that'd be too crazy if you're, I mean, this isn't crazy. You turn Klay Thompson, Caleb Martin, Jaden Hardy. D'Angelo Russell is a guy who can be your point guard for the rest of the season. Jaden Hardy's a young guy who still has some value to you. Maybe you can get something out of Klay Thompson. And then Caleb Martin has a few years left on his deal, and he kind of fits what you guys are doing. You give him a young guy in Gigi Jackson. You get another guy in John Conchar to fill up the void that Klay Thompson and Caleb Martin leave you. And then obviously Ja Morant, and then Kyrie Irving could be your backcourt moving forward. I don't think that's like quite preposterous, but what do you guys think? Like, that's basically where we're at with this video. If you guys made it to the end of the video, let me know your thoughts. I thought this was an interesting topic to discuss. But yeah, I'm gonna head out, go watch some basketball. Cheers. Ciao.